friends. I'm Christy Hughes, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one is for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. Now, I am talking today on our Sunday Shortie about a topic that some people have mastered. So, I'm not necessarily rocking the damn boat today, other than trying to instill the courage in you that if you have not thought about what smart money moves look like in your life, then take a closer look. I am leaving my corporate 9 to 5, and really it's an 8 to 5. Let's stop calling it 9 to 5 because we all work 8 to 5 and none of us take a lunch, right? So then it becomes, automatically a 45-hour work week. I am looking for some freedom in my life, some opportunity to prioritize my health and well-being, my mental health and well-being, and also inspire others in a big way through coaching and women's retreats. I am looking forward to what this next chapter brings. Why am I so brave, and why am I able to make this leap from a six-figure salary to self-employment? Well, some people would just say I'm crazy, regardless of how much of a nest egg I have. But I have been thoughtful and smart with my money, and it's not because I'm an expert. And so I'm going to rock your boat by telling you that regardless of how much knowledge or experience you have with investing or saving, that you can do this if you set yourself on a course to leave the corporate 9 to 5, to stay at home with your kids, to do whatever it means to have corporate freedom or retire early. Now, I am not a financial advisor, so I am not promising anything in the way of a return. I am not suggesting that you quit your job tomorrow and not have a nest egg or something smart that you are doing with your money. I'm just here to tell you how my story looks and what I have done throughout my life to end up where I'm at today, to have enough to pay myself over a year's worth of salary and to cover my expenses, and have some other assets that are in my back pocket should I need them. So I moved to Phoenix, Arizona in 2012. And there are a lot of jobs that you can take where they will offer you a relocation package. And this happened to be one. So I was able to get not only some down payment to put on a new home, but also moving expenses and other things that meant that I had a little bit of money in the bank when I took this job. I lived below my means for a short amount of time, living in a one-bedroom small apartment, trying to save up some money. And I used that little nest egg to buy a home that, for all intents and purposes, was out of my budget. I talked about this on a previous episode that I looked at. Okay, so my boss was telling me, oh, move to Arcadia. Well, if you know anything about Arcadia, it is between Phoenix and Scottsdale. So it's kind of on the outskirts of Scottsdale and in between. So before you get into Scottsdale, where everything is crazy expensive. But Arcadia was up and coming at the time. And she told me, like, oh, it's a hip place to be, and there's bars and restaurants. And yeah, it was. And she knew how much money I was making. So I thought it was crazy that she would suggest that I move to Arcadia. However, that gave me a spot to start looking from a real estate standpoint. And at first I thought I wanted to be close to the office, and my poor realtor, we would go look at so many properties close to the office that were within my budget. And I just didn't like any of them. They were so cookie cutter. And if you know the Phoenix market at all, you know there's stucco houses with red tile roofs. There are a lot of cookie cutter neighborhoods. I didn't like that. That was not speaking to me. And I finally decided I was starting to look at properties outside of the search area that I had given her, and I was looking down toward Arcadia. And there was a little pocket of homes, a little neighborhood that was sort of close to the Biltmore, which is also a swanky area of Phoenix, further west than Arcadia, so it wasn't as expensive. And I found this little home that was at the top end of my range. I think at the time it was 194, something to that effect. I was a first time home buyer, so I could buy with as little as 3% down. I went to look at this property with my realtor and we stood on the porch and I noticed that the cross street was Glen Rosa and there was another that it was actually on a street called Campbell. And actually, I'm sorry, it was 19th Street. And there was a cross street not far away that was Campbell, which is where one of my best friends in the world ended up living. Like he lived there and we ended up making a connection. So this move was always meant to be. But it was 19th Street in Glen Rosa, and I have family who lived in Glen Rose. So, Glen Rose, Texas, I was making that connection, being a few streets away from Campbell, which is my maiden name. So, there were all these signs pointing me to this house. I loved the house. I loved the layout. I loved the neighborhood. It was not cookie cutter whatsoever. So, it was this cute little stucco house with this huge picture window in the front. I knew that it would press my budget, but I was willing to do that. And property taxes were so much lower in Arizona compared to Texas, so I saved a little bit there. I decided to take the leap, and I knew that this would be a good investment. And 3 years later, when I moved, I walked away. I paid 194.5 or might have gotten a little bit off that price, but I don't think he budged. I think we ended up buying for list price, or I ended up buying for list price. Ryan ultimately moved in with me to that house, and we sold it for $310,000. So I had listed for 315. I think my realtor at the time thought I might have been a little crazy, but we ended up having an offer for 310, which we sold for. So I walked away from that deal with six figures. Put 20% down on a home in Westworth Village. And again, I had in my mind where I thought I wanted to live. I wanted to live in Arlington because we had moved back to Texas. I grew up in Arlington. Those were my stomping grounds. I had a comfort level there. This time I listened to my realtor. So, whereas the first time I kind of drugged my realtor along with an area that I wanted to live, I listened to my realtor who said, Westworth Village is a hidden gem. The River District is coming up and coming, and there's all sorts of things happening. And we found a house that was, I don't know, 240 or something at the time. I was able to put the 20% down. We were actually going to put more down, but the realtor or there was a loan officer who recommended that we just pay everything else off, which was smart. So paid off cars, paid off any debt that we had, put the 20% down. We sold at the peak of COVID. So when the market was crazy high, we sold that house for 372.5 or 372. Again, my realtor thought that we were crazy, but she was willing to test the market. So we sold, walked away with over six figures, but over $100,000. We bought a camper and lived in a camper for a while, so we were saving tons of money, but we used some of that money to pay off the land that we had purchased in Hamilton. So that way our land we owned free and clear. We owned our camper outright, and we had some other things that we paid off with that money that we had to, of course, you over the course of 5 years, you get a new car or you have other things that come up that you want to pay off. So paid off Ryan's truck. I think just had a little bit of a nest egg for what we needed, and we had a down payment on the cottage that we ultimately put in Hamilton. We improved our land in Hamilton, which was raw land. We put the cottage on it. We did a DIY cabin shell. So I sold my Jeep, which was also paid off, and we used that to buy a little cabin shell that we put on the land. We did all the DIY work ourselves, kept working on this property. And when we moved away from Hamilton, it was really tough for me to sell. And I really didn't want to. And because all we had was this small little $700 cottage payment on the Hamilton land, I thought we could hang on to it for a while. And it was fine. We had purchased a new home in Walnut Springs. I was able to pay the $700 a month on that little cottage. But once we decided to sell, unfortunately, the market had dropped, but we knew that with 20 acres plus all the improvements we made on the land, we could list pretty high. Now, this time, our realtor tested the waters with us and it did not work at all. They were frigid. So we started at something like $499. We kept having to drop the price. We ended up selling just under $400, but the land was paid off. We only owed $70,000 on that cottage, $80,000 maybe. And we walked away with a really nice chunk of change, which we put some down on the home that we own now. And I have actually, if I were to live off of my minimal budget, I actually have about 3 years worth of funding available to me. Somewhere along the way, also, I kept trying to decide if I was going to invest. Ryan and I had learned a little bit about index funds, and we had invested in those, but it had kind of been hit or miss. I felt this overwhelming message from the universe to purchase another piece of raw land. So I did. I financed it for 5 years, which meant a pretty hefty payment, but it was almost like putting money in a bank account or in an index fund that I know that someday that land will be worth more than I paid for it. And also because I paid it off so quickly, ended up using some of the Hamilton money to pay it off, that I own 10 acres free and clear in Texas. Now, land prices were terrible this year, so it's not, I would have sold at a loss this year. But it was always a 5 year plan because I financed it for 5 years. So in 5 years, be 2028 is when it would have been fully paid off. It's paid off now. Who knows? Maybe 2028 is going to be the year that it sells for 15 an acre. I don't know. But at whatever point I need to sell that property, I have that and I have that income should I need it or should we need it for any emergencies. Now, granted, you can't liquidate land right off the bat, but it is an asset that I'm holding that will benefit me in the future. I also have put I've put the $8,000 a year now that you can put into an IRA. So I have an IRA, I have 401k, which I will be walking away from when I leave my corporate job. So I'll transfer that into my IRA. I've been putting money aside in an index fund, so dealing a little bit in the stock market. Now I'm sort of risk averse, so I'm not putting a ton there, but that is money that will grow theoretically. So, what I'm here to tell you and how I'm rocking your boat today is that you do not have to be a real estate expert. You do not have to be a finance expert. Find something that is within your comfort zone of putting a little money aside. And maybe it is buying a little stock, or maybe it's investing in an index fund and reading a little bit about, you can use ChatGPT or YouTube or any of those things. Of course, it will always come with a risk, but you can learn about funds that are working. And a lot of them just require a little bit to go in. Things with the bank aren't what they used to be. So CDs don't have a great return. Money market accounts don't have a great return. I was going to move my income, or what I'm sitting in to supplement my income, over to a money market account. Something like, I don't know, 0.02 per year. It's really not going to benefit me. So, and there's a minimum balance. So if you drop below something like $25,000, then you have to pay. Not interested in looking for something from the bank, but definitely there's opportunities to invest. A lot of people use a financial planner. That's great for them. I don't want to have to give somebody a percentage or 2% or 3% of what I make. So I'm just doing it on my own right now. Not to say I won't use one someday. And I'm not knocking financial planners whatsoever. I have friends who have made some really smart money moves with their financial planner and are planning for early retirement or whatever that looks like in their lives to be able to have some financial freedom. But I want to encourage you to take one little step out of your comfort zone when it comes to saving. And, you know, Dave Ramsey would tell you to cut all the fluff, the Starbucks and and I'm not going to tell you like to give up everything that brings you joy, but if you just stick $5 a week into, a savings account, you can create automatic transfers. Anytime you get extra money, can you put that into something that will grow? If you have the means and you want to do rental property or Airbnb or something like that, there are ways to help your money grow through real estate. You do not have to be an expert. That is what I'm telling you. So, find a resource that works for you. If you are committed to finding a way out of corporate or making a big leap or a big career change, you will find that it is easier to be smart with your money than if you just didn't care. So trust me, you will find a way. I did. I feel like purchasing that land and putting money towards that was a smart move. Selling Hamilton, even though I didn't especially want to, afforded me the opportunity to jump into creative entrepreneurship and leave the corporate grind. And I'm so happy that I took those leaps of faith and pushed out of my financial comfort zone at times. And here I am, 2 weeks left. Let me know if I can answer any questions. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Please follow, subscribe. Long episodes drop on Wednesdays, Sunday shorties on Sunday, and I will talk to you again very soon.